Open Line. Senator Heidi Campbell is with us tonight to answer your question, 615-737+. Senator Campbell, before we move to the next caller, Denise wanted specifically to know about homelessness. Is that the state's business to have a hand in helping to solve that crisis here in Davidson County?
You know, homelessness is an issue that certainly the state could help help with funding for programs and things like that. But for the most part, it tends to be more of a municipal issue. That having been said, I know that we as legislators are very interested in making sure that we can do everything we can to help people in our district with those issues. And that certainly is something that we're dealing with right now in Nashville. But inevitably, I think it's more of a municipal issue.
And that's where we've seen some strides just over the past few months here in Davidson County. Let's hop back to the lines. We have Dawn on the line. Good evening, Dawn. Hi, Dawn, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
I'm sorry, Donna. I was just told it was Donna. Go ahead.
My question is about housing, and I understand these developers coming in and tearing down what already exists in communities, but leaving other people scrambling to where they're going to move to, where they're going to move to, can they afford it? Because the wages we make here in Davidson County is still not enough for us to go and get anything affordable. Affordable and low income are two different things, and I think they missed the mark when they say that, because in HUD property they pay 30% of your rent. So if you live in a HUD property, that means you got to make enough money to even live there, because they're paying 30% of your rent. But if it's higher, you can't afford to live there neither.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You know, I mean, I think one issue that we need to really look at there is that we need to look at increasing the minimum wage. You know, we're not living in a city that's affordable for most people anymore, and that continues to happen as we grow. And so it's wonderful that the state works so hard to bring big corporations here, and we have a lot of growth when it comes to businesses and job creation. But the part of the reason that a lot of these companies want to move here is because labor's so cheap.
Right.
And so it's kind of on the backs of residents in Tennessee. And so, you know, we're looking at, I have been running bills for paid family leave and for you know, obviously, we should be expanding Medicaid so that healthcare costs are, you know, manageable. So those sorts of things are very difficult issues to pursue in this state, because we have a supermajority that tries to prevent us from doing that, because they really are business focused.
Let's talk about this legislative session. The new one starts in January. You are going in as a Democrat, as you said, against this supermajority. It is hard. So what do you think you want to accomplish and can accomplish in this next session?
Well, you know, I mean, you do have to definitely choose your battles. I mean, I think it's important to continue to message things. So I'm going to run again a full legalization bill for cannabis that I'm doing with Representative Freeman. That's important. You know, Missouri and Virginia have now legalized cannabis completely. And then, of course, we have most of the surrounding states that have medical cannabis. So we are really at not just an economic, but a healthcare and social disadvantage by being the island in the southeast now that is not in any way legalized cannabis. So we are going to continue to do that for the messaging purposes. But in terms of things that can actually be accomplished, our colleagues across the aisle have expressed a little bit of ambivalence about the way that the abortion ban, the trigger ban, has passed. I think some of them thought that there were exceptions.
This is crazy. Can we just stop here? Because they messaged to us there was an exception if the woman's life was in danger. And I just could kick myself. I mean, everyone in the newsroom went, what?
Yeah.
That is not what the law says.
Right.
And so now you're saying that there may be some openness.
Maybe, yeah. Well, and I'm running a bill with Hakeem Jeffries to allow for exceptions in the case of rape or incest. I think that a lot of my colleagues thought that that was what they were voting for, and they were surprised to find out that they weren't. And so we're hoping that we can, I mean, we're also going to be running full codification of Roe, you know, in our state constitution. But, you know, that's obviously a heavy lift,
right.
But I think it's an important thing to do. Hopefully somewhere in that spectrum we'll be able to get, you know, some changes made, even if, you know, it's actually one of the bills they're carrying that we support. But we're going to run that as well. And then, you know, there are other things that we need to focus on, like, you know, the governor is actually putting $28 billion, he says, into infrastructure. $8 billion of that is coming from Joe Biden and from the Democrats in Washington, and we're really appreciative of that. We want to make sure his focus, as far as we can tell, is primarily on the rural areas. Mm-hmm. We want to make sure that we're getting some of that money in Nashville and Shelby County, where most of our traffic and infrastructure problems exist. So I think that a lot of our session is going to be about trying to negotiate and talk about how that money is spent too.
Very interesting. Let's get back to the lines. We have, let me see here. We have Howard on the line. Hi, Howard.
Hi, how are you?
I am good. Go ahead, please.
I have a statement, a question also that I would like to ask. There's a big difference between, as the young lady said earlier, between low-income housing and affordable housing. And affordable housing is like for teachers or police or nurses that work that can't stay in the city and live. But when you're getting like $840 a month or $841 a month, you have to have housing that's subsidized. And the thing that I would really like to know is that, you know, economic advance is not the same as human progress. And also, I don't know if you remember back in the 90s, the way they have things set up now for the homeless. They used to have a bracelet called WWJD. Yeah. What would Jesus do? And the way things are set up in this state now, it needs to be WWJG. Where would Jesus go?
Oh, okay.
So what can we do to change the way people think in this society? Because there's many representatives that I know that sat on the Homeless Commission under Bill Purcell, now it's called the COC, and some of them are in the representative on legislative, and they're not doing anything to change the way things should be. And we're getting ready to have this Saturday on the 17th at 8:30 at Riverfront Park, a homeless memorial. Mm-hmm. And people that die on the street need housing. And we need to fix this. And the other thing that I'm kind of losing my thought is how can we get the working class with the poor to come together to make it look like something's really being done in solidarity? Yeah. And a few years ago, Governor Lee found some money that was meant for homeless people, and he put it in a special fund. How special do you have to be to spend the money where it needs to go? Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Howard, for calling in.
I mean, I think that is such an important question. What this really gets at is the fact that our tax dollars, every single time we buy something at the store or when we're paying our property taxes, our tax dollars are being taken by the state for the purposes of providing services that we have agreed as a culture, as a society, should be paid for. And this particular administration is not giving us our tax dollars. And this gentleman makes such a good point. That money is not my colleague's money. It's not my money. It's not the legislature's money. That money is our money. And it needs to be going to helping people, like he says, who are in need of services that we have agreed to provide. And that's a problem that we have, and with the particular mindset of some of the people that we've elected. And I think it's exacerbated by a lot of disinformation that gets sent out about, you know, people's motives and people's intent. And so I think that inevitably, unfortunately, what we're going to have to do is make sure that we're electing people who really care. Mm-hmm. And people who really want to make sure that those tax dollars are getting to people the way they're supposed to.
This is such a strange question to ask, but I think it is very obvious during the legislative sessions especially. Is it hard to be a state legislator from Davidson or Shelby County? Because even though you represent the greatest population in the state, it seems like we always kind of get,
Yeah.
you know, like, oh, them.
Right. It's challenging. And I think that there's not even just a meh reaction, but I think there's almost a punitive kind of, I think there's a lot of opposition to the cities. And, you know, I think it's important to remember that we are the economic engine of the state. And maybe some of the polarized rhetoric that divides us constantly just needs to be toned down so that we can actually do the simple services that government's supposed to do without all of the hype and all of the drama, like, you know, taking care of infrastructure, addressing homelessness, addressing affordability, things like that, because, you know, our Tennesseans are really hurting right now.
The hype, the rhetoric that we often see in the interviews that are put on TV.
Yes.
Is that going on behind closed doors up on Capitol Hill as well?
It doesn't happen as much behind closed doors. It happens a lot more in committees, and I think that's telling. I think that tells us that
the motivation.
Yeah. Right, exactly. That the motivation is more about outwardly focused towards it works. It works.
Yes.
It gets people riled up. Social media is certainly a catalyst for all of that. There's so much anger. You know, I have never talked to a person that didn't want to make sure that their families had enough food to eat, and that their kids got a good education, and that everybody, you know, did the best they could to live a good life. And I think that's really the motivation of my colleagues across the aisle as well. When I talk to them, they're good people, and that's really what they care about too. Unfortunately, this you know, rhetoric and this kind of far right stuff, I think, has kind of dominated the conversation because it's politically advantageous.
Yeah. Let's get back to the phone lines. We have John, who's been very patient with us. Hi, John.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. Go ahead.
Okay, I'd like to talk about the marijuana issue for a second and what I think might be a good solution to that. First of all, because I think you're wasting your time in the legislature trying to legalize marijuana. If you could get, the marijuana has not been legalized in very many states in any other way but a referendum process. That's what Tennessee needs. It would bring the poor and the working class together, and we could go and overturn, by proposing our own proposals, all sorts of things. The minimum wage, which is a shameless thing in Tennessee, the legalization of marijuana, which has been so popular. Since 2018, there was a poll done on it where something like almost 80% of people want that legalized. What do you think that is today? But Governor Lee knows better than all of us. We don't need daddies in the legislature. We need a way to get things done. And I would say, I would encourage you to please put a referendum bill in front of these guys. If it doesn't pass, I don't know what we can do. But you are not going to get Governor Lee to sign off on marijuana legalization. He's already said no, he'll veto it. And so I'd sort of like you to address that, please.
Okay, thank you, John.
No, thank you. You make a good point. You know, I think it's important to understand that that's not going to be something that gets anywhere in this particular legislature. We've got some older people there who kind of come from the war on drugs era, and they are not going to let that move. So, you know, part of our job, I think, is to continue to remind them that, as this gentleman says, John is very right. It's over 80% of Tennesseans are for some form of legalization. And so, you know, that's one issue amongst many, expansion of Medicaid, all kinds of issues, but that's one issue where we are not doing a good job in the legislature of representing the interests of Tennesseans, obviously. The overwhelming majority want to see something done about that, but, you know, we're not going to change that until we change the makeup of the legislature.
And there has been some bipartisan support. I remember Beth Harwell, shortly before she left, she had a family experience with someone who was needing some medical marijuana, and her perspective changed a little bit, and she started to speak out about it.
Right.
But it's inch by inch with this issue.
And, you know, we do have a task force now that's set up to study it, which in some ways is a way of making sure that it doesn't happen if it gets rescheduled on a federal level. But the progress is slow, and really just being blatantly honest, because we go around and around about this, that's not going to move until we have, especially sort of the upper tier leadership, interested in seeing it move. And right now, that's not the case.
It's not a priority.
Yeah.
It's not the case.
Yeah.
All right, we have to take another commercial break, but when we come back, we would love to take more of your calls, 615-737+. So give us a ring. We'll get those calls lined up. Stay with us.